Please welcome Mark Curtis.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks a lot, Peter. Paul, just to let you know, we'll never make you take your Patriot stuff off. We live in New England. Well, thank you. You know, he started out with those videos, you know, and it brought to mind we had one incident. This was back when we had a single tunnel in Greenwich, and we used to have a boom with a prep gun on it, and we prepped the cars before they drove into the tunnel, and this is when the people stayed in the car. And the little old lady pulls up, and we soap up the car, and we tell her to pull ahead. Well, she steps on the gas, and she goes through not our tunnel, but the garage next door, which was an auto repair facility. Bursts through the door, hits 3 cars, ends up on her side, and guys go rushing over, and they pull the car over, and they go, "Ma'am, are you all right? Are you all right?" And she goes, "Yeah, I'm all right, but I think I slipped on the soap." True story, true story. So as Peter alluded to, I graduated from Franklin Marshall College, and when I graduated, I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I thought that if I was a banker, if I became a banker, that I'd be able to look at a lot of different businesses and maybe see a business that I really like. So I went into the training program of a bank called Union Trust, which was a large regional bank out here in Connecticut. And graduated the training program, became a credit analyst, and was later promoted to a commercial lending officer. And it was a job that I absolutely adored, you know, because I got to get into all these businesses and see what made them tick. But what it really did was it gave me the bug. You know, I saw these guys, you know, the masters of their destiny, captains of industry, and boy, I wanted that. So every Sunday, I would get the New York Times. And back in the day, they had this large classified ad section at the back of the business section of the paper on Sunday. And it had dozens and dozens of businesses. So every Sunday, I'd get down there and look at each ad and see each business and try to determine whether that would work or this would work and imagine myself in that business. And one Sunday, there was this nondescript ad. And the only notable thing is it had a Greenwich phone number. And because I was working in Greenwich and living in Greenwich at the time, I figured, well, what the heck, I'm just going to call it. So I call it, and it's a broker on the other end saying that it was a car wash at the west end of Greenwich for sale. And I seem to recall that having gone there once, which should have been a clue. And he said they were doing 50,000 cars a year. I go, 50,000 cars? Oh my, no way. And he goes, well, go down and count them. Now, you may not know this, but certain days of the week are busier than others, like Saturday. You'll never guess what day of the week I picked to count cars. And there are certain times of the year that are busier than others, and usually winter after a snowfall, when the cars are covered with salt and sand, is usually a very busy time. You'll never guess what time of year I picked to go count cars. So Saturday in March, after a snowfall, I counted close to 500 cars. Now, being this smart lending officer, I multiplied times 360 and came to a number that was far in excess of the 50,000 cars that the broker told me that this place was doing. And I'm like, so I immediately called my friend Chris Fisher. Chris and I had started a boat cleaning company during the summer, you know, when we were 15 years old, and I you know, had found this business. I call him up. I go, Chris, there's this business. We've got to buy it. He goes, what is it? And I said, it's a car wash. And he goes, well, we don't know anything about washing cars. And I said, and I swear this came out of my mouth. I said, how hard could it be? Dirty car at the front, put them on the conveyor, soap, water, comes out the back, clean. What do you got to know? He goes, well, Mark, we're not very mechanically inclined. I'm glad my wife isn't here because she would tell you just how mechanically disinclined I am. And I said, no problem. They've got a manager down there who can fix everything. And he goes, well, Mark, we don't have any money. And I said, well, yeah, you're right there. but I do know how to write a really good loan proposal. So, so 2 months later, with some borrowed money from State National Bank and from the seller, we were in the car wash business. And I'll never forget it because it was May 1st, 1981, beautiful Friday. Pollen filled the air and coated the cars. And we went from the closing to the car wash, and there was a line of cars going through our wash out to the road. And I looked at Chris and I go, we're geniuses. And I got to tell you, here we were, masters of our destiny, captains of industry in the successful business. And boy, that euphoria lasted a good 24 hours. And I swear to God, this is when the baling wire and the gum the guy had used to hold the equipment together began to unravel. I'm not kidding, Saturday. We bought it Friday, it started to break down Saturday, but we pressed on regardless. We're going to do this. And of course, we had to do a couple of things. We had to rename the place because it was called Carl's Auto Bath. Well, what are you going to do with that? So being the marketing geniuses that we were, we came up with the name, the Tahiti Auto Spa. Because nothing says car wash like Tahiti. Paul, it sounded like a really good idea at the time. I don't know where it came from. So then we were going to have a grand opening, and we were really going to do it big, Tahiti theme, wear Tahitian shirts and give everybody leis when they came in, balloons and hats, and really do it up. But then I figured we had to feed them. So, nothing says Tahiti like hot dogs. So I'm trying to calculate how many hot dogs I should get for the grand opening, and I'm estimating that we're going to do about 500 cars that day. Thinking some people should come by themselves and some will have the family. And so somehow I come up with the number 900 hot dogs. So beautiful Saturday, grand opening day, cars are going through. But this might surprise you, not everybody is as big a fan of the breakfast dog as I am. So 8 o'clock comes and goes, no dogs. 9, no dogs. 10, 11. About 11:30, the first dog rolls off the grill. I ate it. But at the end of the day, we actually did close to 500 cars. And we gave away 64 hot dogs. So I had to find a home for 834 hot dogs. And I didn't know Terry back then. So every person I knew had hot dogs in their freezer. And I would show up at every barbecue with a box of hot dogs. Whether I knew the people or not, I showed up with a box of hot dogs. I stopped getting invitations. But we pressed on. And the equipment just started to continue to degrade and break down. And the manager was an interesting guy. He set up two things. When we broke down, he used to send the customers that came in to a car wash in Port Chester, where his son was running the car wash. And he also set up a self-directed profit-sharing program. And by that I meant he would direct some of the daily receipts into his pocket. And that really presented a dilemma, because when I caught him, now I had to fire the only guy on the property that knew how to fix anything. But fortunately, a guy came along shortly thereafter, young guy, helped me out running the site, was a good mechanic. We slowly started to build the business back. And that was until June 21st, 1983, when the bridge over Coscob Harbor on I-95 collapsed. And what it did was it took all the traffic from 95 and put it on Route 1, where we were located in Greenwich. Now, most people would think, oh, what a boon for business. Think of all that traffic. Well, nothing could be further from the truth, because what it did was it prevented our customers from getting to us, and nobody got out of traffic. You just wouldn't pull out because you couldn't get back in. We lost 70% of our business for several months. And I can tell you, if I didn't have a very understanding banker and a very understanding landlord, I certainly wouldn't be here talking about car washing with you this morning. But it did solve one of my problems. I didn't have any more employee problems because I didn't have any more employees. It was me. So I would prep the car at the front of the wash, get it on the conveyor, and then run to the back of the wash and towel dry it. Then I'd run back to the front and do it next one. And few days after doing this, a guy shows up, and he doesn't speak any English, and I don't speak any Spanish. I mean, zeros on both sides. But it was pretty clear that this guy needed a job, like he hadn't eaten. And it was pretty clear to him that I needed help. And what was more than that is that I had real respect for what he was doing because I had done his job. And vice versa. He had mutual respect because he knew that I had walked a mile in his shoes. And really, this was the basis, the genesis of the culture at Splash. It was just appreciation for what the other person was going to do. So Stanio and I washed cars, him at the back, me at the front, and pretty soon we were doing a few more cars. We hired a couple more people, and it began to grow and grow. And along the way, I hired a guy named Frank Murphy as an assistant manager. And Frank was a great guy, good mechanic, thank God. But he was something more. He was a Christian. And I was single, and the business started to do well, so I had a little bit of money, and I was living the high life, and dating a lot of girls and partying all night. And from time to time, Frank and his wife would have me over, and occasionally the conversation would drift towards faith, and I always gave him the stiff arm, because I had been raised Catholic. I was telling the guys last night that I had calculated, having gone to parochial school and Catholic high school and being an altar boy, that I could stop going to going to church on Sunday once I graduated high school, and I would average going one time a week until age 40. And that's pretty much what I did. Until one night, Frank and Max confronted me and said, Mark, you're a successful businessman, you're a great guy, everybody loves you, you're always smiling, things seem to be going really well, but something's missing in your life. And I'm thinking to myself, how's this guy risking his job, talking to me about this, and how am I going to push him off? And that was until I realized I had tears coming down my face. And I realized very clearly at that point that it wasn't Frank that was talking to me, it was my Maker talking through Frank to me, and that everything that he was saying was right. So that night I invited Jesus into my life. And I would tell you that I find it no coincidence. Here I was single at 38. Within 18 months, I met the girl of my dreams, one night in Bermuda, and married her 18 months later. I was also given the inspiration for this car wash that would wash cars on conveyor by hand. And not just any car wash, because back in the day, back in the 80s, early 90s, full-service car washes, you would go into usually an unheated hallway and a little room, where they might have a cashier behind the glass, and they might have a couple of fragrance trees on the wall that you could buy, and that was full service. But what I envisioned was this wall of glass where you could look in and see the whole process being done, and brightly lit tunnels and tile walls, and a nice warm store with greeting cards and gifts and all this stuff. And sure enough, we made that happen. We opened the second tunnel at the same location in Greenwich, the hand wash tunnel, in July of 1994. And it met with such resounding success. People were coming in. People were coming from Westport and Fairfield, New Canaan, Darien on a weekly basis to wash their cars. We had people coming in, bringing their guests in for the weekend, videotape. We were on the front page of the Boston Globe. We were on page 3 of the Daily News. It was heady and fantastic. So I said, Chris, we got to do this again. Stupidly, he listened to me again. So the following year, we opened up, we took over a place in Bedford Hills and converted it to a hand wash, and that's when we named it Splash. Previously, the Tahiti Auto Spa became the car wash of Greenwich, and then became Splash as well. Our third location was on Westport Avenue, which was an old fabric store up from Stu Leonard's that we converted into a car wash. And then the following year, we got a little bit crazy and added Darien, Fairfield, and Cheshire. So in a mere few years, we had gone from one location and, 8, 9, 10 employees to well over 100. And this was really a problem because at the same time I was kind of new to faith and wrestling with, how to be a businessman and be a Christian. And one of the things I really felt was that I needed to be filled with forgiveness. And so I would forgive. As employees made mistakes, I would forgive them. Well, it didn't take long for them to catch on that all you had to do if you screwed up is just to ask for forgiveness, and Mark would forgive you and you'd keep your job. And it just got worse and worse, and I keep forgiving, and they got worse and worse. And the guys that were good employees, they went in one of two directions. They either figured, if we can't beat them, let's join them, or they just simply left the company. So in a few years after really restarting the business and having this successful enterprise that was so exciting, I really wanted to, I just wanted to end it. I didn't want to be in business anymore. It was that bad. The inmates were in charge of the asylum. And then God sent me an angel, a guy named Don Osgood. Now, I don't know if any of you knew Don Osgood, but Don was an incredible guy, incredible man of faith, businessman, consultant, author. And he calls me out of the blue one day, and he says, Mark, can I come meet with you? I said, well, sure, Don. So he comes in and he goes, hey, Mark, how are things going? And I go, Don, they're really going bad. And I spill my guts and tell him everything. And I'll never forget what he said. He said, Mark, God never meant for you to be a doormat. In fact, he wants you to be the steward of these people, and by steward, you need to hold them accountable. So he put out a graph, a simple graph with one horizontal line. And he said, you see this line? I said, yeah. I said, this line is what is required of the job. It's really simple. This is what you need to do, and if you do it, you keep your job. That's the consequence. If you perform above that line, well, then you're rewarded. You're given bonuses. You're promoted. If you perform below that line, then you've got to do one of two things. You either have to get them to move up to the line, understand that they're moving up to the line, or they're moving out. It's as simple as that. I'm like, gosh, so simple. About the same time, literally within the same month, God sent me more help. A guy named Dan Petrelli was my soap salesman. And I'm telling him that I need this HR guy, this guy that's going to help me train, help in operations. And he said, well, I'd like that job. I got to tell you, Dan is one of the most remarkable team builders I've ever seen. Just unbelievable manager and trainer of people. No formal training of his own. In fact, he was a college dropout because of problems at home. In fact, at one point, he was homeless, sleeping in a dugout of a baseball stadium up in New Haven. But here he was, and it was as if Don and Dan had, who have never met, had written the book together on how to manage people. And Dan really worked on that kernel of culture that we had started so long ago, which was one of respect, of being thankful and grateful for the people that work for us because they were so integral to the success of our wash. And he came up with this thing called purpose, tools, and process. He believed that if you told people why they were important to the company and the success of the company, they would work harder. They would be engaged. They'd be connected. Really simple. You gave them a purpose. And then you showed them the tools that they were going to use, and then you showed them how to do it. But then he did another thing. He got rid of my management technique, which he referred to as drifting clobber. And what drifting clobber was is you would change somebody what to do, and then you'd leave them alone until they screwed up, and then you come in and clobber them. He was more in the fashion of constant correction until it was a habit. If somebody didn't want to constantly be corrected and get it, if they were below the line, he'd move them out. And what ended up happening is it started to breed a culture where the guys that were working for us were doing the exact same thing. They were there making sure that the guys that were working with them were doing the job, because they didn't want this guy's lousy vacuum job or this guy's lousy wash job to mean that that car was going to come back around and they were going to have to redo it again, that it would be a reflection on them. And I started to look at the company as a microcosm of God's kingdom. You know, that these were God's children, and my job was to bring out the best in them. And so we have people from all over the spectrum. We've got guys that started as vacuumers and guys doing windows that are now running million-dollar businesses completely. They come up with their own budget. It's open book management. They have to review their results. They hire, they fire, they train. It's pretty remarkable. But then we have a whole slew of guys out there that you know, just come and want to come to a job where they're respected, they do meaningful work, and go home with their paycheck. I want to tell you about two of those guys. After this snowfall, when they cover the streets with salt and sand and that will harm your car's finish, and you take your car to get it washed at Splash, if you were to go to Greenwich and go to the hand wash, you'll see 4 guys hand washing the cars. 2 of those guys, Gonzalo and Julio, have been in that tunnel since we opened it in July of 1994, washing cars. Now, we go, Gonzalo, Julio, you're great workers. We can move you outside. We can move you over here. And they said, no. This is our job. If we're doing it wrong, tell us, and we'll fix it. If you move us, we quit. They've been there ever since. But what's interesting about that is the ownership that they took of the job. And that's really what it was all about. These people owned the job. Not only did they own the job, they owned the company. They treated it as if it was theirs. And what resulted was something that was completely unique. In our industry, we're known for 100% turnover. But at our company, nothing could be further from the truth. We celebrate each Christmas by having a party for the people, the guys, and we recognize anniversaries, especially long ones. This year we recognize 56 people who have been with us between 10 and 14 years. Another 20 between 15 and 19 years. 6 between 20 and 24. And Ramiro Valdez, who's our manager in Cascab, celebrated his 25th anniversary last year. It's remarkable. And what these guys have done, these guys have created a company that started doing 24,000 cars in 1984, where we'll now wash over 1 million cars this year with over 500 employees. And the best part about it, and the part that I like the best, is we'll support over 450 different charities, local charities. Now, as for me, the story about me, I'd love to tell you it was a linear process. I came back to Jesus, and everything was perfect from then on. Nothing could be further from the truth. And I suspect, and we kind of talked about this a little bit last night, I suspect some of you might suffer from the same affliction that I do, which is one of control. And rather than place my trust in the Creator, in God who's carried me all through all these circumstances, bridges falling down, managers stealing, employees being, all of it, I still want to take control. I want Him to bless the plans I have sometimes rather than listening to the plan that He has for me. But the great thing is, we have a great and very patient employer. And God takes me into His office quite frequently, and He says, Mark, you see this graph? You see this line? This is where I want you to be. This is where you are. But thank God He's given me the purpose, tools, and process to get there. Thank you.